Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. Bandit camps, ambushes, dungeon enemies are types of activities in games where you as an adventurer can just be walking around and then you might stumble upon a camp or a base or something like that where the enemies will start attacking or they'll be peaceful and you have to attack them. Some kind of story / gameplay element. It's great for adding to games, it gives the player more things to do on side quests and it can be really cool. So in today's tutorial we're going to set up a type of camp enemy system where you can drag it in and then within a radius it will spawn random enemies wherever it can, and then when you take them all out it logs that this camp has been cleared or this location is cleared of enemies, and then as a bonus we'll look at adding it into a quest using the narrative framework. We'll add some dialogue where a shopkeeper tells you to come down and stuff, and then we'll even quickly browse and look at how you would handle saving and loading. So let's get started. So this is pretty much the camp I've set up. Whilst it's not the best camp in the world, it does work for what we need in this instance. So I'm going to come straight into my blueprints folder, and in my MISC folder, I'm going to right click a new blueprint class, type of actor, and I'm going to call it location activity. And I'm going to drag this straight into the middle, just like this. So there are several ways you can have the enemies in here, and it entirely depends on what you want to do. You very well might want the enemies in fixed positions when you arrive here. So where you walk up and then the enemy might be by the fire, the enemy might be stood next to each tent kind of thing. If you want that, drag your enemies in, place them where you want them to be, and then just create an array on here to link the enemies to it. The only thing you have to look at after that is when you call load on your game, if the camp's been cleared out, you then need to go and destroy those enemies. So for that reason, to avoid the destroying, I'm going to go the opposite way, and I'm going to say only if they're allowed to be spawned, then just randomly spawn the set amount of enemies around here. And then using the Unreal spawn collision logic, we can basically say don't spawn in a tent, just move to the side kind of thing, and we'll be able to tell it how many enemies to spawn. So jumping into the blueprint location activity, I'm going to go to the event graph and I'm going to create a new function called spawn enemies, and then I'm going to create a new variable called num enemies to spawn, and I'm going to set it to a type of integer. The reason we're using integer instead of a float is you can't have half an enemy, and I'm just going to by default set this to 5 just so it's configured nicely for future ones we don't have to worry too much about. Then I'm going to drag this inside our function here, and I'm going to drag off and I'm going to do for loop. Now you'll commonly use for each loop in Unreal, which is for looping over things. What we're doing is we are creating a loop to go over a number. We're going to drag the num enemies to spawn to the last index. So the first index is 0, the last one is 5 in this case, and it'll go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the loop body, we can now start spawning our enemies. So I'm going to drag off and do spawn actor from class. The class of type we want, depending on your game, you might want some random enemies, you might not. For me, I don't have any at the moment, so I'm just going to hard code it to my ALS NPC character here. The spawn transform, we will sort in a minute, but just right click and split it. The collision handling is the one where we don't want them to spawn inside tent. We're going to set it to try to adjust location but always spawn. So this will continuously keep moving it until it finds a spot. Meaning if it tries to spawn it in this tent here, it will keep moving it across until it can spawn it. If you've got back-to-back things, there is a chance that you could be spawning way out of the element, but in this case it's a pretty open area, so we should be good. So the next thing we need to handle is the actual spawning of the location around the area. I'm going to right click and do get actor location, which is going to get the location of this waypoint here, which is why we put it roughly in the middle. I'm going to drag off and I'm going to use the nav mesh function, get random reachable point in radius. So what this is going to do is basically look down at our blueprint and draw a big sphere around it, and then whatever we set the radius to is how big the sphere is, and then it will try to randomly put an enemy in there. So if you set it to say 10, that'll be your random area this big here. If you set it to 1,000, you might, you'll have an entire map kind of thing. So it's going to be a fine-tuning thing to roughly get the size what we need. So I'm going to try 160 radius. This very well may be too small, it may be too big, we'll just have to play with it. And then from the random location, I can just plug it into the spawn transform location. And the benefit of this random reachable point is if an enemy spawns underground, it's not reachable because the nav mesh can't hit it, so it'll move it up and try somewhere else, which would be really cool. If you want to do random rotations, you can. What I'd advise is splitting on it and then just randomly rotating the Z-axis. So I'm going to do random floating range, and I'll do between 0 and 360. You could use the other function of random float, but then you could get a ridiculously large rotation. You don't need it. Just do 0 to 360. It's a lot easier. And then that's pretty much our enemy spawning. So I'm going to come back to the event graph, and just for ease sake, on begin play, I'm just going to tell it to call spawn enemies, just like so. And I'll compile and save. Now, when you run the game, you very well may see that your actors won't actually appear where you need them to. They might appear somewhere completely different. They may not spawn at all. And the key for it is you need to press the P key. And you'll see that now I have enabled nav mesh mode. You can see I don't have any nav mesh. So the key with get random reachable point is it needs to be reachable to the nav mesh agent, and we don't have it at the moment. So what I'm going to do, just for ease sake on mine, is I'm just going to come in and drag in a nav mesh bounds volume, and I'm just going to pretty much scale it up just to fit this very rough area where I need it. And now you'll see if I press the P key now, I now have a nav mesh built within this square which roughly covers here, which means now the enemies should be able to spawn around this area. And now you can see the enemies are here. The ALS code is kicking in, so they are just randomly moving around for some reason, and they're all facing the player as well, but that's something to fix in the future. We've got one slight glitch with this little chap here. So there are our 6 enemies spawning. So with the guy spawning in the floor, that normally means Unreal can't find an area to spawn them in. So 160 was probably just too small, really. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to increase mine to 600 and see if there's enough room and we're not having any major issues. So you can now see when we spawn in the game, the enemies are successfully standing around. I've removed the behavior tree from them, so that's perfect. So we can walk up, and they've got an interaction at the moment. I need to remove that. That's a bug on my part. But it means I can run up, and using the very basic attack system I've got, they can eventually die, which is perfect, because then we can log that to this location marker to say whether or not the enemies have died. So depending on your enemies and whether you're using a framework or not, you may or may not have an event dispatcher for when the enemy has died. It's completely different for everybody's project. If you've been following along with my tutorials, we have this AC damage system, which is an actor component we've created to handle the damage. And on there, we have event dispatchers for when they die. If you've not got anything like that and your death is just on your actual NPC, just create an event dispatcher of on death and call it when they die. So what we can do using this is we can actually plug in to this enemy's damage system and say, when you die, tell me. And that's perfect for our location activity, because what it means, after we spawn the actor, we can drag off and we can get their damage system, and then we can drag off and we can do bind event to on death, which is our function, and I can connect it up. And all this is going to do is say, when the on death event is called, then tell me. And in my case, here is my damage taken function. So it comes up, damages the enemy, removes health. If they've got 0 health left, then it's going to call on death and then kill the enemy. So this calling on death means we can bind to it using my event dispatchers video, and we can successfully tell our location activity this enemy has died. So I'm going to drag off this event, and I'm going to do create event, and then it'll say, what do you want to create? I will create a matching event, and I'll just call it enemy died. I'll cut this and paste it in my event graph so it's all neatly organized, and then just make sure when you rename it, you come down and call it enemy died. There we go. So now that we're telling the location activity when the enemy has died, what do we do with it? So we can basically come in and we need to check how many enemies we've spawned, and when we remove one from it, we need to check if it equals 0, because if it equals 0, then we know we've completed it. So luckily, we've got a number here which tracks how many enemies to spawn. We can also use that to predict how many enemies are left. So I'm going to drag this up here, and I'm going to drag off of it and do minus minus. And this means decrement in. It basically means subtract 1. It's just a shorthand, so you don't have to drag off of this, get it, -1, then reset it. You can just de-increment it. You also have increment if you do plus plus. That's a programming term. So now we've reduced the number of enemies to spawn, which is perfect. So I'm going to drag off of this new result, and I'm going to do less than or equal 0. And we're doing this just in case there's a glitch and it somehow manages to get to -1 enemies somehow. This less than or equal to 0 would also take care of it. And now if true, then we know we've completed this location pretty much. Now I mentioned at the beginning we'd look at saving on this location activity, or at least advise how you save. Now depending how clever you want to be with it, depends how you're going to proceed with the next step. For example, you have 5 enemies to spawn. If you come in and kill 3, then run away, and you save, what do you want it to do? Do you want it to remember that you've killed 3 and only 2 need to exist? or do you want it to just respawn all 5? You either clear the camp or you don't. If you think of something like Skyrim, you go to a bandit camp. If you kill all but one enemy and run away, if you save and load, come back in, all the enemies will respawn. But it depends how trapped you want the enemies. For my case, I'm going to do it Skyrim style, so you either clear it or you don't, because then it means you've always got potential for more gameplay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another boolean here called location cleared, and then I'm going to drag this out to the true, and I'm going to set it as true, like so. If you're going to do it so you track each individual enemy, you don't need to do this location cleared. You will simply save num enemies to spawn. So the way we're going to predict whether we need to spawn the enemies or not is by using this boolean in my case, or if you're using the number, you need to just load that number into your number of enemies to spawn. So if you've got 0 enemies to spawn, load 0 enemies into it, it won't spawn anyone. For me, I'm going to go into spawn enemies, and I'm just going to drag off the spawn enemies function, and I'm going to add a branch in, and if it's true, and I'm going to drag the location cleared in, and it is the location cleared false, so it's not cleared of enemies, then it will spawn the enemies, otherwise it won't. So let's give this a try. What I'm going to do is just mark it as visible so I can actually see it, and then temporarily I'm going to come into my damage system for my enemies, and I'm just going to set their health to be 1, so we can one-shot kill them pretty much. And now let's try it again. So we can see all the enemies have spawned. If I run up and hit him, hit him, hit him. So we've took 4 enemies out now. So if I press the F8 key to break out into edit mode, which is a cool fact somebody shared on my YouTube video, so thank you for that. F8 gives you full control of the map like so. We can click our location activity and see the number of enemies to spawn is 1. So you might be wondering, why have we only got 1 enemy to spawn, but we've killed like 4? And that's down to our for loop on our location activity. Loops in typical programming start at 0. So we're saying the first index, the first iteration is 0. The last iteration is 5. So technically that is 6. The first index is 0, which is technically iteration 1. Then index 1 would be iteration 2, because then we've done it twice at this point. And it'll keep going up until you get to index 5, which is the last one, but the iteration would then be 6. The easiest way around this is just to increase the first index to skip the 0 index, so it always starts at number 1. And now you'll see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 enemies. Perfect. And if I run up and kill them, and if I press F8 again to break out, click my location activity, you can see I have 1 enemy left to spawn. If I click back in the game and kill him, you will now see the location has been cleared. Perfect. So this is where we can show the UI to say location cleared, congratulations, give the player some XP, anything you want really. So let's do a very basic UI just to pop up on the screen and say location cleared, nice and simple. So I'm going to come down to my UI folder. I'm going to create a new folder called widgets. This is going to be full of our little things like this, like the interaction, pop-up, anything else like that. And I'm going to go right click, user interface, widget blueprint. I will set it to a type of user widget and I will call it WB for widget blueprint underscore location cleared. And I'm going to open this up. So I'm just going to go for a dead basic text thing. So I'm going to add a canvas panel and I'm going to add a text component into the middle of it. And then I'll tell this text component to size to content and I will place it holding control and shift to the top here like so. So it'll come down from the top and say location cleared. So in here it will say location cleared just like that for now. If you've got a custom font, you can set it all to that. I've not gone down the UI route just yet, so I'm going to keep it as basic. I'm going to increase the size to say 40 so it's nice and big. And I'll also give it an outline so it stands out. I'll come to outline settings and I'll just set it to 2. And by default it's black anyway. There we go. So it'll just say location clear. Let's add a really basic animation to it just so it looks a bit nicer. So I'm going to come down to the bottom of animations here. I'll click animation and I'll call it show message and I'll open it up. I'll make sure I've selected my text here. Come back to the animations and click track and you'll see it will give me the option to track the text that we've selected. So I'll just click that and that's our text block 828. And I'm going to click the plus and I'm going to just add a transform. I'll open it up and I don't want the rotation, the scale, or the shear, so I'm going to get rid of those. I'm just going to keep translation. I'm going to dock this to the layout so we don't keep losing it. And then I'm pretty much just going to click this Y option here and drag this so it's out of the canvas panel because I want it to fade in on the screen. So I'm just going to grab this Y and I'm just going to drag it so it goes out. You'll have to go quite big, so I'll just make sure it's definitely out like that. So that's okay for me. And I'm going to tick this little keyframe button here to render a keyframe. You might need to zoom in and you'll notice it won't render a keyframe. That's just because you have to scroll across a little bit and then add another equal keyframe so it renders it, but that's fine. So we've now got a starting keyframe where it's out, and then we want it to fade in. So I'm going to say at about half a second, so just about here. Then I'm going to drag this other keyframe down, just dragging it across to half across, and I'll set it to 0. So I don't want it touching the direct top, so I'll maybe 50 it just so it's got a little gap. And then you can see if we press space, you'll see it comes down and fades in nicely. One other nicety we can do just to make it look a little bit nicer is I can come back to the text block, click the plus, and I can click render opacity. And then right at the start, I'll set it to 0 so it's invisible, and I'll make sure I tick that keyframe button. And then as it fades down, I will type 1 and I will add the keyframe in. And all this is going to do is make it fade in as it moves down, so it looks ever so slightly nicer. And then what we'll do, just to save us creating any timers or anything, I'll say after 3 seconds, I'm going to add a keyframe to both of these like so. So it'll fade in, it will wait for 3 seconds, and then what we can basically say is at 4, and the reason I'm picking these numbers is at the start we've done 0 to half a second, so 3 seconds after that will be 3.5, then I'll do another half a second for it to fade away. I'm going to set the render opacity to be 0, and then I'll set the translation to be back up at minus 160 or something, and then I'll make sure I tick that keyframe. So what we now have is it will fade down like so, it will wait on screen for some amount of seconds, then it'll disappear. And then you can configure this to however you want, but for my need, that's pretty much everything I really wanted to do. I'm going to hit compile and save, and the only thing I'm going to do is come back over to the graph. I'm going to delete the event tick and the pre-construct off, and just on the construct, I will drag in the show message animation from the side, drag up, and I will just do play animation. And now we can hit compile and save. So if we were to render this widget to the screen, it would immediately play the fade down saying location cleared, then it will fade up and be done. So what I'm wanting to do is on my HUD, when we tell it to show the location cleared, I want it to spawn it somewhere, say location cleared, disappear, and then destroy itself. Because it doesn't need to be active on the HUD, even invisible, if we're going to use it, say, 20 times in the game or however many camps you have. So one other thing I'm going to do to this is I want it so when we spawn this UI, it spawns to the screen, and then after it's finished, it removes itself from the screen because it's a small notification. It doesn't need to be there permanently. So I'm going to come to the animations tab, and I'm going to click our animation again, and I'm going to add a new track, a type of event track and trigger. And I'm going to come really nearly to the end where it's disappeared, and I'm going to come to just about the keyframe near it. If you go to the last keyframe, Unreal's got a habit of skipping it, so I'm not going to do it there. I'll do it the keyframe just before, and I'm going to click on our event track, and I'm going to add a keyframe like so. Then I'm going to double click the keyframe to go into the code view for it. So we can now add code to the animation on that specific keyframe. And all I'm going to do is drag off and do remove from parent, and I can hit compile and save. So now this widget is very much self-contained. We'll spawn it, it will play the animation. After it's finished, it will clear itself up. Nice and easy. So I'm going to come back to our location activity and then back to our event graph where it's checking if the location's cleared. I'm going to simply drag off and I'm going to do create widget, and the widget we want is the location cleared widget. The owning player I will set to get player controller, just in case we've got a multiplayer game so we know who owns it, or you may want to send that to the entire party, I don't know. And then from here we'll just do add to viewport. There's no need to cache it in memory because it's going to clear itself up shortly. Now it hits compile and save, and let's give it a try and see what happens. So nothing's changed at the moment, the enemies have all spawned. Let's come in and we'll beat all the enemies up. So the number is ticking down in the background, we've already discovered this. And now location cleared, it's popped up, perfect, and then it fades away after 3 seconds. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? It's really coming along nicely now. So as it stands, that's pretty much all you really need to do for it, because that's the basic camp system. There's so much more you could do to it, where you could make it so once you kill all the enemies, these change different colours, maybe a flag plays a different colour, a sequence happens. I'm basing it off the Skyrim style camp things, where you go in, you kill the bandits, it pops up, says you're done, and runs away. That's it. So at the beginning of the video, I did discuss us setting it up so it's ready for saving and loading. So let's crack on with that. So we need some sort of unique name to set to the camp. So we can say when we're loading, find camp, bandit camp 1, and then set its progress so we know how far the player has to completed it, whether they have or not. So I'm going to come back to location activity, and I'm going to add a new variable, and I'm going to call it location name, and I'm going to set it to a type of text. And the reason we're setting it to a type of text is it means we can localize it if you ever want your game to be translated, which is a huge benefit. So I'm going to come back to the landscape here, and then where the location is, I'm just going to give it a name. So I will call it Mountain Bandits. There we go. That's the location name here. And then to save and load it, depending what save and load system you have, if you followed my previous tutorial on a save and load system, I haven't actually implemented it in here just yet, but you will basically only call spawn enemies after you've loaded it. So I had a custom event on my save called post load that I added to to all of it. And then instead of using event begin play, I would simply use post load. And post load will go off and it would set the location cleared status for my version at least. So depending whether or not it needs to load it based off the list of campsites or something. And then only if this is false because it's not being cleared, then it will spawn the enemies. And that's the exact same scenario if you're using your num of enemies to spawn. Load the amount of enemies in this camp remaining and then only call spawn enemies after. For me, at the moment, I haven't got my save and load system set up in this game, so I'm just going to stick with spawn enemies. So moving away from pure Unreal at this point, we can start adding narrative plugins into it to make it really, really cool. So what we could do is we could add a NPC all the way down here. So we'll drag in our ALS NPC and I'll pop him right here and he can be our shopkeeper. I'm going to rename him NPC shopkeeper and then we can create him some dialogue. So I'm going to jump into my narrative folder, dialogues, and I'll right click and I'll go narrative dialogue and I'll call it DB port shopkeeper. That can be his name because I haven't got a unique name yet. And then in the speaker ID, I'll just come across and put spaces in it so it looks neater. I'll make sure that I've applied a tag to him of the exact name of his speaker in the dialogue, and then I will get rid of his default text because we don't want that. I'll make sure to add a camera in the class defaults just so it looks a bit nicer. So I'll do a medium shot, and now this is where we can do it. So we'll drag off and we can make him say some cool stuff. Like we'll just make him in this example say, so we'll say come to see my wares, and then we alternatively could use some alternative lines as well if we want to say multiple things. So we'll say welcome to my shop, and then what does the other Skyrim guy say? Everything is for sale except my daughter. You know, you can really come to terms and have fun changing it whatever you want. And then this is where we can add the player options in. So we'll just add 2 player options for now. One of them will just be goodbye, and the other one will be do you need any help? And it could be anything you want. You look a bit distraught, you overhear an argument, it can be anything you want. So I've just skipped ahead and set the dialogue up for this. So it'll come in and say come to see my wares, and you can say goodbye and end the dialogue, or you can say do you need any help, which eventually when we add the quest in we can wrap it with a if we've already done it you don't need to do it. You'll say yes actually I do. Some bandits keep raiding my coach as it goes to other towns. If you can somehow stop them attacking my coaches, I'll give you a reward from what I have. Then you've got the option to say no not yet, where he'll just go oh okay then, and that's it. Or you can say sure I can help with that, where are these bandits? And then the shopkeeper will say perfect, the bandits are called the mountain bandits and they have a camp just up near the mountains. Go to the edge of town, follow the fence until you see a break in the fence, follow the path and you'll get there. Which is perfect because it means we can say go to the edge of town, which is up here. Then it says go to the fence, follow the fence until you see a break in the fence, which I've already modelled up. Then you go up and you will see the bandit camp here, which at this point they would have already have spawned. Perfect. So let's actually add the quest in then, because you're accepting a quest, let's add it in. So depending on your quest system, hopefully your dialogue can initiate quests. If not, you might need to find a way to do it. But for the narrative sake, I'm just going to come and create a new quest down here, and I'll do type quest. I'll call it QB_mountain bandits. There we go, and I'll open this up. I'll make sure to set the quest name to mountain bandits, and the description I don't really use, so I'm going to get rid of it. My custom modded narrative says I want to show the UI, so that's fine. Then back in the quest graph, we need a way to guide the player to where they want to go. So there's multiple different ways you can do this. You could just literally say go and take out the bandits, and that's it, leave it up to the player. I'm going to do it a bit more structured based, where I say to the player go to the edge of town, and when they arrive here it will say follow the fence, and the fence will take them down here basically and park them up right here like so. So the first task I'm actually going to add to my quest is a go to location node like so, and this go to location node basically says you need to arrive at a location, and it takes in a vector like so. So I'm going to add a target in just so I can pinpoint where they need to be. So roughly here is edge of town, and I'm going to say maybe 600, you know, get within 600 of that to class as end of town. So I'm going to come and hold shift and right click to copy the position, and I'll come back to my quest, shift left click to paste 600. The friendly location name will be edge of town. This is what narrative will actually show on the quest when you get it for the objective. Do we want to add a waypoint? I'll click yes on that, but in future we'll have to come back and fix that because in the next version of narrative that's going to be removed, and then we can hit compile. That's the first objective done. After that I will add in another go to location node, but this time it will be the break in the fence. So the instruction said follow the fence, so we will delete this target off because we don't need it anymore. We will come and find the break in this fence, which we can just use the position of the fence. Shift right click to copy, back to our quest, shift left click to paste. I'll set this one a bit closer, so you need to get say 300, and this one I'm not going to add a waypoint because the instruction said follow the fence. So I want the player to be able to have to think about it a little bit, and then that's where we can now start looking at taking our enemies out. So what we need to do is we need to create a new objective or a task in narrative or your quest system to basically say when a location is being cleared, let me know. And we're going to use event dispatchers to do it. So I'm going to come and add a new event dispatcher on here called on location cleared. And then right at the end, after we've checked if we've cleared the location, we've set it as we have cleared it. I'm just going to come down here, call on here, just like so. And now that we've done that, our location activity is set up and ready for us to create our new objective. So I'm going to come back to my content drawer, and in my narrative tasks folder, I'm going to right click narrative task, and I'm going to call it NT clear location. And I'm going to open this up. I will come and override the begin task option, and then I'm going to drag off and do get all actors of class with tag. The class is going to be my location activity, and the tag I'm going to promote to a variable like so. So now this has given us an array here, and I'm actually going to keep that in because it very well could be you might have a quest like in San Andreas where you say clear this entire region where you have to take out multiple locations at once. Or so it could very well be that one mission may say take all of the bandits out belonging to the mountain tribe, and you have to go there, you have to go there, blah 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 blah. You have to do all of them, and that's one objective that adds it all together. Equally, you may only just want one. So the for loop will take care of one or many. If you actually do just want one at a time, just drag off and do get 0 like so, and just give them a unique tag. In my case, I'm going to stick with the for each loop. Then I'm going to drag off the array element, and this is where we bind to the event on the location again. So this time I'm going to do assign on location cleared. And the difference between bind and assign, bind you have to create the event for, so we created it and moved it around. Assign automatically creates the event for you, so it's nice and simple and quicker. Perfect. So once we've cleared the location, I'm just going to drag off and do add progress to tell narrative to increase the progress of this task by 1. And then the only other thing we have to do is come back down here, and then on end task we want to clear this up, because otherwise we're binding an event to the event dispatcher. Then when we get rid of this task because we complete it, it's still technically got a bound event to it, which is no good because it doesn't work anymore, it doesn't exist. So we're going to clear it up. So I'm just pretty much going to copy the get up here and paste it down here. And you might be asking, why aren't we caching this? It very well could be you might for some reason remove this location or add new ones if you unlock an area. So you don't, or you could have one which destroys and one which stays depending which camp you burn down. There's numerous reasons. So for ease sake, I'm just going to refind it, whatever's there again, just to be safe. And then from here, I'm going to do unbind event from location cleared. And I'm going to make sure I tick event, not all events. If you untick all events and you've got 2 quests which are linked to one camp, it may be go to the quest to steal a trophy, but you'll have another quest to clear the camp out. If you complete one of them before the other, the event will be removed and the task can never be completed up here because it will never bind to it. So it's always safer to only ever unbind the events that you add to it when you know you need to. So it's a lot easier. And now we can hit compile and save. So if we jump back into our quest now, we should be able to drag off and we will see a clear location task here. The tag of the location we want to clear will be the name of it pretty much. So I will come down here, I will click the location. I'm going to copy the location in with shift right click. I'll search for tag and I'll add a new tag and I'll just paste it in mountain bandits like so. I will copy the tag so we've got it back to our quest and I'll paste in the tag like so it knows what it's looking for. The description override, I will set the objective to say clear out the mountain bandits camp. And then after that, then we want to return back to the shopkeeper and say, hey, we've just done it. And now that we've finally cleared this out, we should really go back and talk to him. So I'm going to drag off and just use a play dialogue node, which basically says play this node in dialogue. And then back on the shopkeeper here, let's create a little gap over here, drag down here, and we'll add a new player option in, and it will say I have cleared out the bandit camp, they won't be a problem anymore. And then what we can do to make sure you can only select this at a specific point in the quest is we can add a condition, which we will use the is quest at state, and the quest we're looking for is our mountain bandits, and the state is whichever state in our quest we want this text to be available. So by default, narrative stays on the states and waits for the task to be completed. So the states are waiting points, the quest branches are doors. So quest start, it stays on here, it waits for this to be complete, then it goes through to it to the next state, then it waits for this. So we want it just on this very last state here. You've cleared out the mountain camp, it's waiting here for you to play the dialogue node. So we want quest state 3. So I'll copy that back to my DB and I will add a state there. So this dialogue option will only show if the quest is currently at quest state 3, meaning you've cleared the camp out. Then he can say something rewarding and I'll say, oh, thank you, that's fantastic. Here, take this as a token of my gratitude. So this is where you can add anything you want. You can add currency, you can add inventory items, XP, anything you want. I'm just going to use the add currency one here, which belongs to the narrative inventory plugin. And I'll just say you get 20 gold. There we go. And then what we're going to do is we will copy the ID of this port shopkeeper here, the last node it will play. And back to my quest here, I will set the dialogue node to be that one. And I will add a waypoint to the avatar. And then on this one, I'm going to add an event and I'm going to use the add navigation marker, which is part part of narrative navigation. And then the icon, I will remain exclamation mark because you need to talk to him. The tint, I'll keep as orange. I'll show it on everything. The display text, I'll not put anything because I want to keep it off. The task ID, I'll set it to 0 because that's the 0 task ID here. The actor class is my ALS NPC, and the tag is port shopkeeper. And that's where I'll add the navigation marker and hopefully clear itself off. After that, we can tell the quest it is successfully completed like so. Now we can hit compile and save. The only other thing we need to do is clean up the dialogue a little bit. I'm just going to organize it off a little bit neater. And then we did say earlier we didn't want the player to be able to select this one if the quest has already been taken. So I'm going to add a condition to this of is quest started or finished, and I'm going to tick the not option, and I'm going to select the mountain bandits. So if the quest has been started or finished, you can't call any of this because this is the only way you can get that quest anyway. And that should be everything nicely set up and done. So I'll come back over to my NPC over here. I'll make sure that he's been assigned the correct dialogue. So I'll click him. I'll drag down to the interact begin dialogue, and I'll assign the port shopkeeper text here. I will set his name to be port shopkeeper just so the interaction text works. And the only other thing we've got to do is back on the dialogue where he gives us the quest is we need to actually allocate the quest. So I will add an event of begin quest, and I will set the quest to be our mountain bandits. And now we can compile and save. And that should be it, ladies and gentlemen. So let's give it a try. So you see, we'll start the game. We can run up to him and it'll say port shopkeeper to talk to him. Okay, let's talk to him. It'll say everything is for sale except my daughter. Haha. Then we can say, do you need any help? And he'll say, yes, actually I do. Some bandits keep raiding my coach as it goes to other towns. If you can somehow stop them attacking my coaches, I'll give you a reward for whatever I have. And we'll say, sure, yeah, we'll help you. He'll say, perfect. The bandits are called the mountain bandits. They have a camp just up near the mountains. Go to the edge of town, and when you see a break of the fence, follow the path. And you'll see the icon has spawned and we have the quest. So if we run down here, we can now see the edge of town objective here. If we run up to it, it will now say, go to the break in the fence. So we could change that objective to say, follow the fence and such, which is fine. So let's wander down here for now, and we will follow the fence. Where's this break? We've got the break in the fence here. So it says, clear out the mountain bandit camp. Perfect. So we can run up and clear the mountain camp out. So I'll say it quick. They're attacking us eventually. Let's get them. They'll be throwing arrows at us, spears, swords. Boom, they're all dead. Now it'll say talk to NPC. So we need to update it. The go to location cleared really does need to be a bit longer on screen, but that's fine. You can see we have a marker on the compass at the top and on the map down below where it's telling us to go to this information icon. So let's run down here, and then you will see it's telling us to speak to this guy right here. Perfect. Let's go and speak to him, and he'll say come to see my wares, and you'll say I have cleared out the bandit camp. There won't be a problem anymore. Oh, thank you, that's fantastic. Here, take this as a token of my gratitude. He's given us some money. The quest has succeeded. If we load up the inventory, you can see we now have 70 when we had 50 before. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is a really simple bandit quest location thing, which is really cool, absolutely key for a lot of games, and really easy to create some filler missions, I guess you could say. Now, there was a couple of things I just want to fix up on this. It was saying talk to the NPC. I don't want it to say that. I want it to say return to the port shopkeeper, so that's fine. Then instead of go to the break in the fence, I want it to say find the break in the fence. And then the only other thing is when we were returning back to the shopkeeper, there was no screen space icon to say where the shopkeeper was, and that's just simply because in my UI HUD I haven't added the screen space one. So if I search for screen space on narrative navigator, I can add in the navigator screen space markers on the widget, and I'll full screen it, and this basically just now means it can render the markers on screen. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is the Fable Skyrim every open world RPG clear the camp out quest. Super simple to do, makes a world of difference, and they're really good filler quests. Thank you for watching. Would you like me to see me recreate any other style of quests from games? Let me know below. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.